Let's talk about it. How? That is my first question. How has this book been rated and raved about continuously? It has over 4.2 stars on Goodreads. I mean, Goodreads is owned by Amazon, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, and I mean, none of us want to go into that black hole of despair right now, do we? But that's still a lot of people who have loved this book, who have given this book 5 stars out of 5. And not only that, but Steven Spielberg, why the heck did you make a film out of this bull poop? I'm just confused. I feel like I have read a very different book to what I was expecting. Not only is it problematic in multiple places, not only is the story pretty generic, but the writing is awful. Awful. And we're going to get into this. We are going to get into a lot of detail about this book, but I think in a couple of sentences, the way I would describe Ready Player One by Ernst Cline is it's as if someone has just walked into my home, vomited a load of pop culture references onto my carpet and been like, hey, you, clean this up because you're a woman and are women really, really human? And while you're at it, while you're cleaning up the mess I have made in your house, I am going to say in ridiculous detail what all these pop culture references mean, because I know I'm fantastic. I'm a super nerd and I know all these great things, whereas you, the potential human species, you probably won't get it. So I will spell it all out to you. That is how the book makes me feel, and I don't normally like really criticizing books, like tearing them apart, going into all those little details and saying this is a load of poop. But this book has done remarkably well, and I don't think my critique is going to destroy this book's fame, but I really hope that if you do decide to pick up this book after watching my review, you will be aware at least of the problems it contains and take a step back and reflect on that, unlike Ernst Cline, who's just been like, you know what, I kind of know this is problematic and I'll kindly touch upon it, but I'm not actually going to explore it. Yeah. Hello, it's Jazz at Red Panda Reads and welcome to the first Red Panda Roast. I'm sorry I haven't been here for a little while. My life has just been chaos. I'm organising a conference at work. We've just moved house under really difficult circumstances, and our house has rats and fleas. Yay! So trying to sort all that out. Other than the rats and fleas, the house is lovely. I actually have a bookshelf, which is exciting. We've got a CD rack, which is yet to be filled. But that's a quick summary of why I haven't really been on the internet, and let's begin. Ready Player One is a dystopian novel set in 2044 where climate change and overpopulation has resulted in a very harsh world to live in, a lot of poverty, a lot of famine, a lot of starvation, and basically what a lot of people do to escape the harsh reality of their world is to escape into the Oasis, to escape into the Oasis, which is a virtual environment which you can live in, you can get educated in, you can go and do video games in it. It's an all immersive world for you to live your life, and you just put in your goggles, you put on your gloves, and you're there. And our main character, Wade, is obsessed with the Oasis. He goes to school there. However, due to living in poverty, he isn't actually able to explore any of the other worlds because to move around, in the world costs in-game credits, which you have to buy with your normal money. And the guy who created this incredible virtual reality is a guy named Halliday, who 5 years before this novel starts, he passed away and he hid some Easter eggs in the Oasis, Halliday's Easter eggs, and he's created a competition for people to find the Easter eggs, and the person who finds all the Easter eggs and solves all the clues will win his fortune, which is a lot of money. So thousands of people spend their lives trying to solve the first riddle, and in the end it's Wade, our genius Wade, who manages to solve an incredibly simple riddle that in a really stupid way, and basically he solves the first riddle, he gets the first key to the first gate to start doing all these challenges in the virtual world to get to the end and win the prize. Alongside that, he meets other people and kind of makes friends and gets a love interest, which is incredibly problematic. And then there are also other people in the Oasis who are trying to also get the money, and they are basically a big bad corporation with no face. The villain is pretty 2D, and they will basically do anything to get to the money first, even kill. I know, right? Shocking. So that is the premise of the book. It's basically someone exploring a massive video game full of other video games and challenges to find the treasure. Let's start by talking about the writing. I'm sorry, he can't write. It is so repetitive. The amount of times the same thing is said in a different and uninteresting way is ridiculous. You will get a really nice paragraph explaining about one of Wade's teachers, and you get the gist of the teacher's personality, their teaching style, all these things, and you have a whole paragraph. And then Ernst is just like, they're a good teacher. And there's another bit when he describes a girl he's attracted to, and then he's just like, she's hot. And it's all these things where it's like, yes, I've already got he's a good teacher. You don't need to literally spell it out to me. I mean, isn't that the point of the last 15 lines I read, to show me that? Like, you compare it to something like Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, who does this amazing paragraph where she describes someone preparing a turkey for the meal, and you can literally feel the tension oozing off all the characters just from describing cutting a turkey. Whereas this, he literally has to spell out every single thing, which makes it so boring, or say it in multiple different ways as if to fill up spaces. Like, it's a 400-page book. We could have made it shorter. Like, there's just no subtlety to any of it. And the worst thing is, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, this brings me back to the 80s. Oh, I love all the pop culture references. And I think the pop culture references throughout this novel could have been utilised really well. So, for example, if I'm walking down the street and I see someone wearing a t-shirt with 2 dinosaurs on it, and one of them is saying, curse your inevitable betrayal, I know exactly where that reference is from, and I'd be like, love your t-shirt, another brown coat here. What this book does is it has that t-shirt, it's like 2 dinosaurs, and you're like, clever reference, I like it. And then basically the t-shirt would then say, by the way, this t-shirt is a reference from the pop culture classic Firefly. Like, yes, I know that. And if you hadn't realised what the dinosaurs were referring to, you may not even know what Firefly is. So what is the point of being like Firefly on the bottom? It does that continuously throughout the book. It makes a reference and you're like, oh, that's quite a nice connection. And then it has to blatantly state exactly where that reference is from. And I think the only time it didn't do that was when it was referring to a ship which was based off the Serenity from Firefly, of course. But it did say the ship was called Kaylee, who is a main character from Firefly, and it didn't go, oh, like the mechanic from Firefly, and I'm not going to lie, I was in shock. But throughout the book, every little thing, there's these lovely teleportation devices, which are blue boxes. I'm already like, oh, those are modelled after the TARDIS in Doctor Who. Guess what Ernst then writes? Like the TARDIS from Doctor Who. Yeah, yes, we got that. And the stupid thing is, the main character Wade at one point criticises another character for stating the obvious on a pop culture reference. And I'm like, your whole book has been doing that. And there's parts when he's just like listing movie makers, including Steven Spielberg. Is that why, Steven? Were you like, my name was dropped, he must love me, I'm gonna do it? Like, why? Why, Steven? There's whole bits where he lists different kind of D&D modules, different films, different arcade games, and he acts as if his knowledge of them is so superior and so shocking and so elitist. Like, mate, most people know what Star Wars is, okay? And also, if you're going to use all these culture references, do your research. I'm sorry, there's a bit when they stage what is supposed to be the most epic battle of the century. There are people using magic to defeat the enemies, and they're using magic such as Fireball and Magic Missile. Fireball? 8d6. 8d6 damage Fireball does. Magic Missile? 1d4. 1d4, I think, plus 1. 1d4 plus 1. One dice from a fireball could do more damage than a magic missile. What? Why did you decide in the most epic battle of the history, when you're trying to portray just how crazy and dangerous and the sheer force people are using, why did you choose magic missile? It just makes me think you don't actually know the references you're using. Which is then really disappointing, because for someone who's a big D&D fan, I'm like, yay, you're naming some great D&D spells, and I can really picture that, and the kind of explosions and the damage, and then you're like, magic missile, pew, pew. I mean, magic missile will definitely hit, pew, but come on. So to sum up the writing, it just felt very lazy, and I just really hated that. And sometimes I'd come to the end of a couple of paragraphs and then he would just kind of state the obvious in one line, and I'd be like, what was the point of all that character building and world building, if you can call it that, to then just state it in a couple of lines. Now let's talk about the problematic aspects of the book. And I actually read a few other 1-star reviews and 5-star reviews on Goodreads, just to see if people had felt similarly to me, and lots of the people who rated it poorly had very similar reservations as to what I'm talking about now. And one person did a fantastic description, and they basically said the book was full of limp attempts on social commentary. And I think that perfectly sums up a lot of his writing when he does try and deal with more kind of sensitive and important issues. His attempts are so pathetic, and they also really contradict a lot of the characters' behaviours and thoughts, so you can't really take them seriously. For example, there's a big thing in this book about you shouldn't judge someone by how they look. One of the main characters has a visible difference, which I think had the potential to be really nice consideration of the authors, because it's really lovely to see people with visible differences portrayed as heroes, because often in film and books, people with visible differences, for example, all the James Bond villains are always the bad guys, and that creates prejudice to people in the real world who do have visible differences. So it's great that Ernst was like, you know what, I'm going to include someone with a visible difference. But the problem is how he went about executing it. So Wade meets a character in the Oasis and he's never actually met her in real life, so he just knows what her virtual avatar looks like. And he falls in love with her like that and is very persistent when she doesn't return that love, which in itself is problematic. But he basically is constantly telling her, even before he meets her, even when he's being creepy and stalky, he's talking about how regardless, he would love her regardless of what she looks like. And kind of Ernst tries to follow through with that premise, with her having a visible difference and the main character being very accepting of that and saying that doesn't matter, you don't need to feel ashamed and you shouldn't, which is a lovely thing. But, throughout the book, as I've said maybe 4 or 5 times, Wade is going on and on about the fact that if she is actually an overweight man, that would be a bad thing. And I think that's just ridiculous, because you're still saying that, oh no, there's going to be a certain type of people who still, you know, don't suit what I want. They look a certain way. I don't want that. And it's just really horrible because it's still alienating a group of people. And there's also a few transphobic comments thrown into the book, which just makes me feel very uncomfortable. And then you've also got the sexism. The fact that nearly every woman in the book is referred to by their appearance, even like animated objects. I think there's like a robot woman and the first thing he comments on is her boobs. And it's always just about physical appearance. But then later the character says, oh, I don't objectify women, and it's just like, your character has stated that, but the way he's behaving doesn't suggest that. And his first ever description of a woman is comparing them to an alien species. Okay, I'm exhausted. I hope I have thoroughly shown you why I didn't like this book. The combination of lazy writing, problematic storytelling, and just lack of originality as well meant that altogether it was a very poorly and not very enjoyable book. It is very easy to read. It is very fast paced. A lot of stuff happens and it's not boring is a thing I could say about it. I got through it. At the end, I was very much like skimming and reading it, more because I wanted to do this video because I was just in shock by how bad the writing was. And he did stop dropping as many pop culture references as the book went on, but you couldn't help hating the main character. I was just very disappointed and I don't understand the hype. And I think if you have read this book previously, I hope that if you watch this video and then read the book again, you will be able to pick up on the problems I have highlighted and recognise that this is an incredibly sexist, badly written book that you should throw in the bin.